Okay. So, ang tawag dito. So, for today, we will be continuing lang yung lesson natin last meeting. Hindi ko pa kasi natatapos yung lecture videos since sobrang daming ginagawa. Um, so, what we will do, again, for today, we will be continuing our lesson last meeting. Tapos, I will be explaining what you will be doing for the assessment para makapag-start na kayo. And then, before next meeting, I will be posting the lecture videos for both Unit 1 and Unit 2. So, bago tayo discuss next meeting, make sure to read rin the module for Unit 2 para for our synchronous meeting for next week, we will be focusing lang on facilitation, recitation, participation, and clarifications. Okay? So, without further ado, let's start na. Nga pala, saan tayo huminto last time?
Dun po kay Sigmund Freud, yung sa psychoanalysis.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, na-discuss natin last meeting yung first four schools of thought. Okay? So, we already discussed structuralism, functionalism, gestalt psychology, and psychoanalysis. So, this time around, we will be discussing the fifth major school of thought. Pero before we proceed to the fifth major school of thought, pag-usapan muna natin kung ano yung nag-inspire, ano yung nagpasimula ng major school of thought. Kasi before this school of thought was formed, meron mo ng isang study na ginawa, yung isang specific individual na nag-lead sa formation ng last school of thought na i-discuss natin. So, wait, may pumapasok pa. Okay. So, before we proceed to the last school of thought, pag-usapan muna natin sa Ivan Pavlov. Okay? So, Ivan Pavlov is known for his concept of classical conditioning. So, he was the proponent of classical conditioning. Now, when it comes to classical conditioning, binubuo siya ng different elements. We have the unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, neutral stimulus, conditioned stimulus, and conditioned response. Now, para mas maintindihan natin, kung ano ba yung different elements of classical conditioning, let us first discuss kung ano ba yung study na ginawa ni Ivan Pavlov. So si Ivan Pavlov kasi, ang ginawa niya is that initially, iba yung gagawin niya sanang experiment doon sa aso niya. However, napansin ni Ivan Pavlov during his experiment na may certain behavior or may certain phenomenon na nangyayaring iba during his experiment. So, pag-usapan natin kung ano yung nangyari during the experiment. So, si Ivan Pavlov kasi, ang ginawa niya is nag-ring siya ng bell. Okay. So, pag nag-ring siya ng bell, yung aso niya, wala namang reaction. Wala namang specific response yung aso sa bell. Okay? So, ngayon, ang nangyari is, si Pavlov, ringin niya yung bell, tapos after niya i-ring yung bell, nagbigay siya ng pagkain doon sa aso. So, pagkabigay niya ng pagkain doon sa aso, naturally, yung aso, kapag nakita siya ng pagkain, ano yung magiging reaction niya? Maglalaway siya. Okay? So, again, si Pavlov nagring ng bell, pinakita yung pagkain, since nakita ng dog yung pagkain, naglaway ngayon yung aso. So, paulit-ulit yung ginawa ni Ivan Pavlov na nagring siya ng bell, pinapakita niya yung pagkain sa aso, tapos, in response to the food, nagsasalivate yung aso. Until eventually, napansin ni Pavlov na kapag nag-ring siya ng bell, minsan, before pa niya maipakita yung pagkain sa aso, naglalaway na agad yung aso. So, ano yung naging implication nun? The implication is that na-associate na noong aso yung tunog ng bell sa pagkain. Kaya kahit before pa ipakita ni Pavlov yung pagkain, once na tumunog yung bell, ang nagiging automatic response ng aso is to what? To salivate. Kasi nga, naisip na agad ng aso na kapag may bell, ang kasunod nun, pagkain. So naglalaway na siya in anticipation of the food. Nagets ba kung ano yung nangyari sa study?
Yes po.
Yes po.
Okay. So ngayon, paano natin i-explain yung different elements of classical conditioning when it comes to the experiment or to the study? So, pagdating sa classical conditioning, again, we have five elements. We have unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, neutral stimulus, tapos conditioned stimulus, and conditioned response. So, before mag-take place yung conditioning, before mangyari yung classical conditioning, yung first three elements muna yung meron. So, the unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, and then the neutral stimulus. So, pag-usapan muna natin ano ba yung unconditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response. So, always remember, kapag sinabing unconditioned stimulus tsaka unconditioned response, lagi silang magka-partner. Second, they are naturally occurring. So, natural na cause and effect yung nangyayari when it comes to the unconditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response. Kapag sinabing unconditioned stimulus, ito yung cause. Kapag sinabing unconditioned response, ito yung effect. So when it comes to the unconditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response, you should expect na kapag lumabas or kapag na-expose yung isang organism sa unconditioned stimulus, magkakaroon siya ng automatic response to that or magkakaroon siya ng um, automatic na automatic na response to that which is called the unconditioned response. So, for the sake of example, isipin nyo, let's say na ano ba? Sige, sabihin natin na ganito. Galing kayo sa isang madilim na lugar. Sabihin natin na nanood kayo ng sine sa theaters. Okay? So, dahil nanood kayo ng sine sa cinema, ang nangyari is nanggaling kayo sa isang madilim na place. Tapos, after nyong manood ng sine, lumabas kayo, tapos, syempre, sa labas ng mall, maliwanag. Kapag nasisilaw kayo, ano yung automatic response for that?
Takpan
Anyone?
Pikit po.
Pumipikit po.
Okay, pumipikit kayo, di naman kaya parang tinatakpan niyo yung mata ninyo para hindi kayo masilaw. So, kumaga, parang ganun yung unconditioned stimulus and unconditioned response. The unconditioned stimulus in that is exposure to bright lights. Okay? And then, the unconditioned response, of course, is to close your eyes. So, ganun yung unconditioned stimulus and unconditioned response. Kumaga, hindi mo na-control kung ano yung magiging response mo. Automatic siyang nangyayari. Hindi mo na siya pinag-iisipan na, ay, nasisilaw ako, kailangan ko magtakip ng mata. Hindi. Automatic siyang nangyayari kasi nga naturally occurring sila. So in this case, doon sa study ni Pavlov, ang nangyari is that yung food that is considered as the unconditioned stimulus and then yung salivation is yung unconditioned response. Kasi kapag nakakita yung dog ng pagkain, automatically naglalaway siya. Wala nang processing na nangyari doon na pinag-iisipan niya na, ay, may pagkain, maglalaway ako. Hindi ganon. Di ba ganon rin naman sa atin, sa mga tao? Kapag gutom na gutom tayo, tas nakakita tayo ng pagkain, naglalaway rin tayo. So, parang ganon siya. Nagagets ba?
Yes po.
Yes po.
Yes po.
Okay. So, ngayon, ano naman yung neutral stimulus? Kapag sinabing neutral stimulus, ito yung isang stimulus na hindi nag-e-elicit ng response. Wala siyang response na kumbaga, wala siyang response sa partner o wala siyang pinoproduce na response from the organism. So kapag present mo or in-expose mo yung neutral stimulus sa isang organism, wala siyang magiging specific response to that. So, kung i-apply natin yon sa study ni Pavlov, the neutral stimulus is the bell. Kasi nung una naman, prior to the experiment, kapag pinapatunog naman ni Pavlov yung bell, wala naman nagiging response yung aso. Tapos tatandaan natin that the neutral stimulus, ito yung pinipair natin sa unconditioned stimulus during conditioning. So ang ginagawa during conditioning, binibigay muna or ine-expose muna sa organism yung neutral stimulus and then immediately after ine-expose yung organism sa unconditioned stimulus and of course, because na-expose yung organism sa unconditioned stimulus, magpaproduce yun ng unconditioned response. So again, neutral stimulus, tapos unconditioned stimulus, and then unconditioned response. So NS, UCS, tapos UCR. Nakasunod?
Yes po.
Yes po.
Okay. Ngayon, after conditioning, ang nangyayari is that yung neutral stimulus, nababago siya. So dahil paulit-ulit yung pairing na nangyayari or kung hindi naman paulit-ulit masyadong strong yung conditioning na nangyayari, ang tendency is that matututunang i-associate ng organism yung neutral stimulus sa unconditioned stimulus. So dahil doon, yung neutral stimulus magpo-produce na rin siya ng sarili niyang response kahit without the presence of the unconditioned stimulus. So after conditioning, what happens is that yung neutral stimulus, yun pa rin siya, pero nagbabago na ng tawag sa kanya kasi tapos na yung conditioning. So instead of neutral stimulus, it is now called as the conditioned stimulus. And then the response that the conditioned stimulus has is called the conditioned response. So kung ano yung unconditioned response before and during conditioning, yun ngayon yung nagiging conditioned response. So again, yung conditioned stimulus, yun dati yung neutral stimulus, nagbago lang yung tawag. Yung conditioned response, yun din yung unconditioned response dati, nagbago lang din ng tawag. So in this case, ang nangyari kasi 'di ba sa experiment ni Pavlov is that paulit-ulit niyang ginawa na pinapatunog niya yung bell, ibibigay niya yung pagkain, maglalawa yung aso until eventually yung aso kapag narinig niya yung bell, naglalaway na agad siya kahit hindi pa pinapakita ni Pavlov yung pagkain. So in that case, yung bell, yun yung tinatawag natin na conditioned stimulus and then the salivation, yun yung conditioned response. Naintindihan ba?
Yes po.
Opo.
Yes po.
Okay. So, just to check kung naintindihan, may cases tayo dito. So, magtatawag ako ng mga individuals na sasagot. Is this Shairi or Shairi?
Shairi po.
Okay, Shairi. So, Shairi, pakibasa na muna ng case.
Case number 3. Angela was studying for a test the next day when it suddenly rained outside. Thinking that the classes should be suspended, he stopped studying and stayed up until 3 a.m., playing mobile games and browsing through his social media accounts. To his surprise, his mother woke him up at exactly 6 a.m. so that he could prepare for school. He peered outside only to see that the rain had stopped and that classes were not suspended. Disappointed and unprepared for the test, he unwillingly went to the bathroom and to brush his teeth and take a bath.
Okay. So, for this particular case, tapos nang nangyari yung conditioning. Okay? So, na-condition na si Angelo before pa itong case na to. However, ma-identify pa rin natin kung ano yung elements ng classical conditioning for this particular example. So, Shairi, ano yung neutral stimulus, unconditioned stimulus, and unconditioned response? Yun muna tayo.
Sa tingin ko po, yung neutral stimulus, yung ulan.
Okay?
Tapos yung unconditioned stimulus, yung ang tawag dun, yung paghinto ng ulan. Tama po ba?
Tapos,
Tapos yung unconditioned response, yun yung naglaro-laro siya ng yung hindi siya nag-aral, hindi siya tas
okay, sige. So, tama yung dalawa doon. Okay? So, ganito ha. Tama yung neutral stimulus. Yung neutral stimulus yung pag-ulan. Okay? Tapos, tama yung unconditioned response. Yung unconditioned response, yun yung pag-slack off niya, yun yung late siya natulog, naglaro lang siya, nag-social media lang siya. However, hindi tama yung unconditioned stimulus. So, balik muna tayo sa definition ng unconditioned stimulus para mas ma-analyze natin yung case. Okay? So, di ba, sabi ko kanina, yung unconditioned stimulus and yung unconditioned response, naturally occurring sila, tapos lagi silang magka-partner. So, kapag na-expose yung organism sa unconditioned stimulus, automatic na meron siyang response doon, which is the unconditioned response. So, kung i-apply kasi natin yung sinabi mong unconditioned stimulus doon sa case, which is ang sabi mo, the unconditioned stimulus is yung paghinto ng ulan, that would imply na kapag humihinto yung ulan, yun yung doon kumbaga, doon nangyayari na si Angelo is nagpupuyat siya. So, it would not make sense for Angelo to make puyat. It would not make sense for Angelo na magpuyat kapag huminto yung ulan. Okay? So, sa tingin mo, ano kaya yung appropriate na reason for Angelo na para magpuyat siya?
Yung yung thought niya na masususpend yung klase.
Okay. So, that's correct. Yung suspension of classes, yun ngayon yung unconditioned stimulus. So, ang tawag dito, kapag nasuspend yung classes, of course, alam niyo na wala siyang gagawin kinabukasan. So, ang gagawin ni Angelo, magpupuyat siya kasi there will be no need to, let's say, for example, review for a quiz o di naman kaya do his assignment for that particular subject. Okay? So, sabihin kasi natin na parang ang nangyari, before this particular scenario na sabihin natin na, for example, during the past months or the past few weeks, sobrang daming ulan. Sobrang daming bagyo. Okay? So because of that, ang nangyayari is umuulan. So in response to the ulan, of course, ang nangyayari is suspend ngayon yung classes. So pag nasususpend yung classes, ang nangyayari is si Angelo,
Hindi siya
nagpupuyat na lang siya
nag-aaral.
kasi wala namang gagawin. So, since paulit-ulit na nangyari yon, eventually, na condition si Angelo na naisip niya na kapag umulan, automatically suspended yung klase. Kaya, kapag umuulan, iniisip niya na, ay, okay lang na magpuyat ako kasi wala naman kaming gagawin kinabukasan. Okay? So, Shairi, since yun yung UCS, UCR, and NS, ano naman kaya yung conditioned stimulus and conditioned response?
Yung condition stimulus niya po, tawag doon? Nung nahinto yung ulan, yung walang suspension ng classes. Yun yung condition stimulus.
Tapos,
Tapos yung conditioned response, yun na po yung na siya, naligo na, tas nag-prepare na for school.
okay, sige. Balikan natin ha. Di ba, as I mentioned earlier, kapag sinabing conditioned stimulus, eto yung neutral stimulus dati. As in, kung ano yung neutral stimulus dati, yun din yung conditioned stimulus, nagbago lang siya ng tawag.
Okay.
Same din sa conditioned response, kung ano yung unconditioned response dati, yun din yung conditioned response ngayon.
Okay.
So, tatandaan dito sa case, tapos nang nangyari yung conditioning. Nag-take place na yung conditioning kasi natutunan na ni Angelo Na-learn niya na kung ano yung dapat specific behavior niya pagdating sa dati, which is the neutral stimulus. So, ano sa case yung conditioned stimulus tsaka conditioned response?
Okay, yung condition stimulus po, yung ulan.
Okay?
Tapos yung
Tapos,
condition response, yun yung naligo na siya.
ano yung unconditioned response kanina?
Yung nag-slack off siya.
Okay. So, very good. Yung conditioned stimulus, yung ulan, and then the conditioned response is yun nga yung pag-slack off niya, yung pagpupuyat, paglalaro, pagsa-social media. Malinaw na?
Yes, pagets na pa.
Okay, okay. So, very good, Shairi. Palakpakan naman natin sa Shairi. Okay. So, next naman, tawag naman tayo. Jenny.
Good morning po.
Good morning. Babasa naman yung case, Shairi. Ay, Shairi, Jenny.
So, case number 4. One day at their usual spot, her ex-boyfriend and his new girlfriend walked past her. Seeing her former lover with someone else hurt her deeply and made her cry. Ever since that moment, she would shed a tear whenever that song would play.
Okay, Jenny, ano kaya yung unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, and the neutral stimulus.
So, yung unconditioned stimulus po doon, yung pagpapatugtog niya po ng binaliwala na song. Tapos
And then,
yung unconditioned response niya po is ah yung naiiyak po siya kapag naririnig niya yon.
and then,
Yung neutral stimulus po, nung nung dumaan sa kanya yung ex-boyfriend niya po, parang na-associate niya po yun sa song na binaliwala.
okay, ganito. Tama yung explanation, pero mali yung placement ng dalawa. So, tatandaan na, yung neutral stimulus, eto yung stimulus na naturally wala naman siyang response na binibigay.
Okay
Tapos,
po.
yung unconditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response, magka-partner talaga sila. And then, um, cause and effect sila. So kapag nangyari or kapag na-expose yung organism sa unconditioned stimulus, nagkakaroon agad ng unconditioned response.
Okay po.
So tama yung unconditioned response. Yung unconditioned response is yung pag-iyak niya. So initially, sabihin natin na ganito. Let's analyze the case. Sabihin natin na before pa mangyari itong case na to, think of it this way. Kapag ba sino yun to? Si Bea. Kapag ba si Bea, pinarinig mo sa kanya yung binaliwala, iiyak siya? Or kapag pinakita mo sa kanya yung ex niya na may kasamang iba, dun ba siya iiyak? Which scenario siya iiyak naturally?
Doon po sa nakita niya yung ex niya.
Okay? So in that case, ano kaya yung neutral stimulus and unconditioned stimulus?
Yung unconditioned stimulus po, yung sa ex niya po. Tapos
Okay?
yung neutral stimulus, yung pakikinig niya sa song na binaliwala.
Okay. Very good. Now, um, ano naman yung conditioned stimulus and conditioned response?
Yung conditioned stimulus po, yung ex, yun dun po sa ex niya. Tama. Or yung pag-a-associate niya po ng pagkakita niya sa ex niya dun sa pakikinig niya ng binaliwala. Tapos yung conditioned response po, kapag naririnig niya yung song na binaliwala, naiiyak na po siya.
Okay. So, tama naman yung thought. Naririnig niyo ba yung aso?
Opo.
Wait lang ha. Apollo. Okay. Pasensya na. Aray. Gusto ko sa mga paglaro ng aso.
Akay lang
Okay.
po.
So, anyway, um, ayun nga. So, tama yung explanation, pero when it comes kasi to identifying the elements of classical conditioning, you have to be specific. So, kung ano yung mismong stimulus and kung ano yung mismong response. So, the
Okay po.
conditioned stimulus in this case is yung ano mismo? Apollo, huwag ka maingay. Ano mismo?
Yung Yung ex-boyfriend niya po.
Sure na yan?
Eh,
Kung ano yung condition stimulus, yun din yung ano, before conditioning.
unconditional. Okay po.
Sure? Yun din yung unconditioned stimulus?
Po. Same sa unconditioned stimulus.
Mm.
Yung ex-boyfriend, yung paglagpas po sa kanya ng ex-boyfriend niya at saka yung new girlfriend po
Sige,
niya.
sige. Ganito ha. Para mas madaling maalala. Always remember, the conditional stimulus, yun din yung neutral stimulus dati. Okay?
Okay po.
Tapos, ganito ha. Sige, para mas madaling maalala, yung conditioned stimulus, after conditioning, yun yung, kumbaga, yun yung stimulus na kahit wala na yung unconditioned stimulus, nagpo-produce pa rin ng response. So, in this case, ang nangyari kasi kay Bea, kahit na hindi niya na nakikita yung ex niya na may kasamang iba, as long as naririnig niya yung kantang binaliwala, naiiyak na
Okay
agad
po.
siya. So, anong conditioned stimulus kaya?
Yung conditioned stimulus po, yung pakikinig niya doon sa binaliwala na song. Tapos
Okay, and then,
yung conditioned response niya po is naiiyak po siya doon.
okay, very good. So, palakpakan naman natin si Jenny.
Thank you po.
Okay. So, proceed na tayo sa next individual natin, which is John B. Watson. So, katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, Ivan Pavlov was the inspiration for the foundation, o kumbaga, was the inspiration for the formation of the next school of thought. Okay? So, yung school of thought na to is behaviorism. And behaviorism, ang proponent ng school of thought ng behaviorism is John B. Watson. So, ano ba yung focus ng behaviorism? Yung focus ng behaviorism is learning of certain behavior. Okay? So, ang nangyari kasi si John B. Watson, nung nabasa niya yung study ni Pavlov, na-inspire siya na uh, possible pala na matuto yung mga tao or yung mga organism kapag meron kang ina-associate na specific stimulus sa isang specific response. Okay? So, kumbaga, pwedeng mag-produce yung isang stimulus na hindi naman nagpa-produce ng response dati ng bagong response. So ngayon, ang inisip ni Watson, possible kaya na hindi lang behavior yung pwede nating, or kumbaga yung pwede nating makondisyon sa mga organism. Possible kaya na matutunan ng mga organism na mag-produce ng emotional state or emotional response sa isang stimulus. So, ang ginawa ni John B. Watson is gumawa siya ng study niya, which is known as the Little Albert Experiment. Ngayon, si John B. Watson, ang purpose ng study niya was to identify kung possible nga na ma-condition yung isang emotional state. And for his particular study, nag-focus siya sa emotion of fear. Ngayon, ano bang nangyari doon sa Little Albert Experiment? Doon sa Little Albert Experiment, ang nangyari is that si John B. Watson, kumuha siya ng isang bata. Okay? And itong bata na to, ang pinangalan sa kanya or ang tinawag sa kanya sa study is Little Albert. However, pseudonym lang to or alias niya lang to in order to cover up yung identity ni Little Albert. Now, before the experiment, ang ginawa ni John B. Watson is nag-present siya ng various na stimuli kay Little Albert. And one of the stimuli na in-expose niya kay Little Albert is a white rat. Okay? So, puting daga. Ngayon, ang nangyari or ang ginawa ni John B. Watson during the experiment is that pinapakita niya kay Little Albert yung white rat, and then after showing the white rat to Little Albert, he would hit a metal rod. So, dahil hinit niya yung metal rod na yun magpaproduce ng loud sound. And ang tendency, diba, yung mga baby, kapag nakakarinig sila ng loud sound, natatakot sila kasi they do not know where it's coming from. Tsaka, of course, ang tendency, kapag when they hear a loud sound, since nagugulat sila, natatakot sila kasi wala silang idea kung ano yung nangyayari. So, dahil sa fear na na-experience ni Little Albert, meron ngayon siyang certain behavior na ginagawa. Pwedeng naiiyak siya, pwede rin naman na lumalayo siya, papalayo kay, sorry, napindot ko. Yun na lang yung next ha. Merong, Ah, ang tawag dito? Cherry, ikaw mamaya ha. Tandaan mo na. Ah, pwedeng lumalayo siya kay John B. Watson. So, ang ginagawa ni John B. Watson is that record niya kung ano yung certain behavior ni Little Albert. Tapos, ini-interpret niya ngayon kung ano sa tingin niya yung ibig sabihin ng behavior na ginawa ni Little Albert. Kasi of course, since Little Albert naman is a baby, walang way si Watson para interviewin si Little Albert na, oh, bakit mo ko linayuan? Ano bang nararamdaman mo? So dahil doon, si John B. Watson yung nag interpret ng certain behavior ni Little Albert. Ngayon, ang nangyari is paulit-ulit yung ginawa ni John B. Watson na ine-expose niya yung white rat kay Little Albert, tapos hinahampas niya yung metal rod para mag-produce ng loud sound until eventually, kahit i-expose pa lang ni Watson yung white rat kay Little Albert, natatakot na agad si Little Albert. Nagpapakita na agad siya ng behavior na indicator of fear. So ngayon, so ngayon, naging successful yung study ni John B. Watson in the sense na kaya, or in the sense na na-discover niya na kaya rin palang i-condition yung emotional state ng isang tao. Nakasunod ba?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
yes po.
Nagets ba?
Yes po.
Yes po.
Yes po.
Okay. So ngayon, ang nangyari is that, aside from discovering that emotional states can also be conditioned pala, one individual, particularly Mary Cover Jones, si Mary Cover Jones is known as the mother of behavior therapy. Okay. And kaya siya tinawag na mother of behavior therapy kasi yung study niya kay Little Albert yung naging way para ma-open up or para mapag-aralan kung ano ba or paano ba natin mamamodify yung certain behavior ng ibang tao. So ngayon, ano bang ginawa ni Mary Cover Jones sa study niya kay Little Peter? Si Mary Cover Jones kasi, nung nabasa niya yung study ni John B. Watson, na curious siya. Tapos, gusto niya malaman, possible kaya na ma-reverse natin or ma-counter natin yung conditioning na nangyayari sa isang tao. So, in the case of Little Albert kasi, di ba, na-condition siya na matakot sa daga. So ngayon, si Mary Cover Jones gusto niya matutunan or gusto niya malaman, possible kaya na yung takot sa daga ni Little Albert ma-reverse natin na mawala yung takot niya sa daga. So ang ginawa niya, gumawa siya ng isang study about naman kay Little Peter. So si Little Peter, iba siya kay Little Albert. Okay. Tapos, yung Little Peter experiment, ginawa siya para para ma-prove ni Mary Cover Jones yung existence ng counter conditioning. And yung counter conditioning, katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, ito yung process ng pag-reverse or pagka-counter ng conditioning na nag-take place prior sa isang individual. So in the case of Little Albert, yun yung takot sa daga. So ang ginawa ni Mary Cover Jones is replicate niya yung research ni Little Albert, yung experiment ni John B. Watson kay Little Albert, pero meron siya mga bagay na minodify afterwards. So doon sa Little Peter experiment, ang ginawa ni Mary Cover Jones, before conditioning nag-expose siya kay Little Peter ng various stimuli. So meron ding white rat, merong rabbit, merong monkey, merong mask. Tapos afterwards, of course, syempre walang reaction si Little Peter doon sa mga stimuli na yon. Wala siyang response. And then afterwards, during conditioning, ang ginawa ni Mary Cover Jones kung ano rin yung ginawa ni Watson kay Little Albert. Pinesent niya yung white rat, tapos may loud sound, tapos in turn, syempre matatakot si Little Peter. Until eventually, kahit wala ng loud sound, natatakot si Little Peter doon sa white rat. However, si Mary Cover Jones kasi, tinry niyang i-present din yung ibang stimuli na present niya nung una. Tapos, napansin ni Mary Cover Jones na mas takot si Little Peter sa rabbit kesa sa white rat. So, bakit kaya nangyari yon? Meron kasi tayong tinatawag na stimulus generalization. Now, this particular phenomenon will be discussed once we reach Unit 3 I believe, kasi that's about learning eh. Excuse me. So, ano ba yung stimulus generalization? I-cover lang natin ngayon siya briefly, okay? Pero i-discuss siya in depth pagdating natin sa Unit 3. So, yung stimulus generalization kasi ito yung phenomenon kung saan uh, yung mga, yung ibang objects na may similar characteristics sa stimulus kung saan na-condition yung isang tao, magproproduce siya ng same response. So, for example, di ba, saan ba talaga kinondisyon si Little Peter? Doon sa white rat. However, the rabbit has similar characteristics to the white rat in the sense na pareho silang white and pareho silang furry. So, anong nangyari ngayon is na-condition si Little Peter na lahat ng bagay na white and furry magproproduce ng loud sound kaya natatakot si Little Peter. Actually, yung stimulus generalization, nangyari rin naman siya sa experiment kay Little Albert. So, ang nangyari naman kay Little Albert, natakot rin siya sa white fur coat, tsaka sa Santa beard na sinuot ni John B. Watson. So, similar to the rabbit, yung white fur coat, tsaka yung Santa beard na ginamit or sinuot ni John B. Watson, both are white and furry as well. So, ngayon yung nangyari. So, ang ginawa ni Mary Cover Jones, balik na tayo sa experiment kay Little Peter. Ang ginawa ni Mary Cover Jones is instead na yung rat yung gamitin niya sa counter conditioning, ang ginamit niya yung rabbit. Kasi napansin nga niya na doon mas takot si Little Peter. Probably, dahil sa size, since mas malaki yung rabbit, kaya mas takot si Little Peter sa rabbit kesa doon sa white rat. So, ang ginawa ni Mary Cover Jones for the counter conditioning, actually marami siyang ginawa. However, ang pinaka-effective na method na ginawa ni Mary Cover Jones is what we call direct conditioning. And ang ginawa niya sa direct conditioning is that i-expose muna ni Mary Cover Jones yung rabbit kay Little Peter. So of course, ang response ni Little Peter is fear. Kasi tapos na yung conditioning eh. So the conditioned stimulus is the rabbit and then the conditioned response is the fear. So anong nangyari during counter conditioning is that pinipresent ni Mary Cover Jones kay Little Peter yung rabbit. So, anong nangyayari? Natatakot si Little Peter. And then, afterwards, ipepresent ni Mary Cover Jones yung favorite food ni Little Peter kay Little Peter. So, tatandaan niyo, di ba? Kapag, kahit kayo, kapag nakikita niyo yung pagkain na favorite niyo or comfort food ninyo, di ba, kahit papano, parang nare-relieve yung stress ninyo, sumasaya kayo. If you've had a very stressful day, minsan kinikrave niyo yung comfort food niyo in order for you to feel better. So parang ganun yung nangyari kay Little Peter. Na pineset mo na sa kanya yung aversive stimuli or aversive stimulus na ayaw niya, which is yung rabbit. And then afterwards, pineset sa kanya yung isang favorable stimulus, which is yung favorite food niya. So dahil doon, after niya ma-feel yung isang negative emotion, naka-feel naman siya ng positive emotion. So kumbaga, nagbabalance out yon. Kaya ang nangyari is, nung unang ginawa yon ni Mary Cover Jones kay Little Peter, tinolerate niya yung presence ng rabbit. Na nung una, takot siya sa rabbit, pero nung binigay na ni Mary Cover Jones yung favorite food niya, tinolerate niya yung presence ng rabbit in the sense na natatakot pa rin ako pero okay lang na nandyan siya kasi dito naman yung favorite food ko. Until eventually, paulit-ulit yung ginawa ni Mary Cover Jones hanggang mawala yung fear ni Little Peter doon sa rabbit. Naintindihan ba?
Yes
Yes
po.
po.
Yes
Po.
po.
Opo.
Yes po.
Okay.
Apo.
So, that is counter conditioning. Ngayon, marami kasi criticism, particularly yung experiment ni Little Albert. Bakit? First kasi, there is no objective means to evaluate the child's reactions. Tandaan, ang ginawa lang naman ni Watson is record niya lang kung ano yung mga naging reaction or kung ano yung mga naging response ni Little Albert pagdating or upon exposure doon sa white rat. Tapos, siya din yung nag-interpret kung ano sa tingin niya yung ibig sabihin ng mga reactions or responses na yon. And di ba, As discussed last meeting, kapag sinabing subjective yung isang bagay, based lang siya on your own interpretation. Kapag sinabing objective, walang bias, factual siya, based on certain standards or criteria. So dahil sarili niya lang interpretation yung ginamit niya, paano mo masasabi na kapag lumayo yung isang baby or isang bata, ibig sabihin nun, natatakot talaga siya. Walang ganong basis kasi yung experiment ni Watson. So dahil doon, mahirap siyang i-generalize or mahirap sabihin na reliable yung results ng experiment ni Watson. Aside from that, another criticism is of course the ethical violations of the experiment. Ngayon, hindi mo magagawa yung experiment ni Little Albert. Kasi kapag ginawa mo yon, um, possible na tanggalan ka ng lisensya kapag ginawa mo yung experiment ni Little Albert. Yung experiment, sorry, kay Little Albert. Why is that? Tatandaan nyo na una, Little Albert is a child. Okay, bata si Little Albert. Although, of course, yung ginawa namang experiment ni John B. Watson, may consent naman yun ng magulang ni Little Albert. But still, bata to. And the fact na yung batang to, wala siyang takot sa daga dati. Pero after the experiment, nagkaroon siya ng takot sa daga. Yun yung, yun yung awful or yun yung parang negative effect or adverse effect na nangyari because of the experiment. And always remember, as researchers in the field of psychology, it is your responsibility to make sure na no harm will come to your participants. Or if hindi mo na foresee, hindi mo na iwasan na may harm na mangyayari sa participants mo, responsibility mo na i-reverse or i-counter yung effects na yon. And ang nangyari kasi sa Little Albert experiment, immediately after ng mismong experiment, si Little Albert saka yung mother niya lumipat ng place. And since lumipat sila ng place, hindi na alam ni John B. Watson kung saan mahahanap si Little Albert and yung mother niya. So dahil doon, hindi na siya nagkaroon ng opportunity para i-reverse or para i-counter yung effect ng study kay Little Albert. So dahil doon, ang ina-assume ng mga tao is hanggang ngayon, merong pa rin takot si Little Albert sa mga daga. So para ma-realize nyo yung gravity nung situation na yon, isipin nyo na lang paano kung ginawa to sa medical field. Kung saan yung isang bata, wala siyang sakit dati. Tapos in-injectionan mo siya ng something na nagbigay sa kanya ng sakit afterwards, tapos hindi mo binigyan ng lunas, hindi mo binigyan ng cure or gamot for that particular gamot. So, ang assumption is yung bata na yun hanggang ngayon meron siyang sakit dahil sa'yo. So, para yung ganun. So, because of that, yun nga, sobrang daming criticism kay Watson because of that particular scenario. In fact, maraming tao na gustong malaman ano kaya yung nangyari kay Little Albert in the long run. Na tumanda ba siya na hanggang ngayon meron pa rin ba siyang takot sa white rat or any white or furry thing? And because of that, it led to a lot of exploration from different groups of researchers. Maraming naghanap kay Little Albert. And currently, we have 2 leads. Okay? So, merong 2 sets of researchers na pinaniniwalaan nila na sila yung nakahanap kay Little Albert. However, wala tayong confirmation kung sino talaga doon sa dalawang yon yung Little Albert talaga. So, ang nangyari is that yung unang group of researchers, nahanap nila si Little Albert pero nahanap nila nung patay na. Okay? Nung nahanap nila, na-discover nila na si Little Albert daw, or yung at least yung pinaniniwalaan nilang Little Albert, namatay daw when he was 7 years old. Although, hindi naman yung reason kung bakit niya kinamatay is yung experiment. Okay? Si Little Albert daw kasi, meron siyang hydrocephalus. Okay? And yun yung naging cause kung bakit namatay si Little Albert. Ngayon, nung dinisclose nila yung information na si Little Albert pala is may hydrocephalus, nagkaroon na naman ng further criticism kay John B. Watson. Why? Kasi doon sa paper ni John B. Watson, hindi niya naman sinabi na meron siyang, na meron palang hydrocephalus, supposedly, si Little Albert. Ang sinabi niya, completely healthy si Little Albert. So, because of that, the assumption is nag-lie si John B. Watson Tapos, pangalawa, mahirap kasi na i-generalize yung results ng isang study kapag yung isang tao is merong certain condition na siniset apart siya from other people. Okay? Possible kasi na um, since may hydrocephalus si Little Albert, possible na hindi mo siya pwedeng i-apply dun sa mga tao na wala namang hydrocephalus. Kaya when you are conducting an experiment, kumbaga, you have to be specific when it comes to your participants. Kasi again, possible na hindi mo nga pwedeng i-generalize yung results ng study mo sa mga tao na wala namang nung characteristic na yun. Nagigets nyo ba?
Opo.
Opo.
Okay. So, another group of researchers naman, sabi naman nila, na-discover rin nila si Little Albert. Tapos, yung na-discover naman nila ni Little Albert, buhay pa naman, okay pa naman daw yung Little Albert na yun. So, wala naman silang kumbaga, wala naman silang na-discover na parang long-term bad effects pagdating doon sa Little Albert na nahanap nila. However, ayun nga, wala tayong confirmation kung sino talaga si Little Albert doon sa dalawa na yun. So, mahirap masabi kung ano yung naging long-term effect kay Little Albert nung experiment. So, si John B. Watson yung first leader of behaviorism. However, in the New Age, si B.F. Skinner yung kinonsider na new leader of behaviorism. B.F. Skinner, ang buo niyang pangalan is Boris Frederick Skinner. Okay? However, a lot of people kasi think na it's too long. And yung ibang tao nahihirapan na i-spell yung pangalan niya. So, siya na lang yung nag-adjust, B.F. Skinner na lang daw. So, B.F. Skinner is known for his concept of operant conditioning. Now, if classical conditioning is learning through association and focuses on stimulus and response, operant conditioning is learning through consequences. According kay B.F. Skinner, natututo daw tayo because of the consequences of our behavior. Na kapag meron kang ginawang isang bagay, nakadepende kung negative or positive yung magiging nakadepende kung anong klaseng consequence yung may experience mo para tumaas yung chance or bumaba yung chance na uulitin mo yung isang behavior. Again, so operant conditioning, pinaniniwalaan na yung consequences yung nakaka-apekto kung tataas yung chance na uulitin mo yung behavior or bababa yung chance na ulitin mo yung isang behavior. And pagdating sa operant conditioning, meron tayong different components. We have positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. So, ganito ha, pagdating sa operant conditioning, do not think of positive and negative as its usual definitions na kapag positive maganda, kapag negative pangit. Think of it this way. Kapag positive, meron kang dinadagdag, you are adding something. Kapag negative, meron kang binabawas. You are removing something. So, isipin nyo na lang yung corresponding sign for positive and negative. Di ba kapag positive ang sign is plus. And di ba kapag plus, meron kang dinadagdag. Addition nga siya, di ba? So, sign siya for addition as well. So, merong dinadagdag. Kapag negative naman, ang sign is the minus sign. And minus sign is used for subtraction. Kapag nagsasubtract ka, may binabawas ka. So, positive, may dinadagdag. Negative, may binabawas. Naintindihan ba?
Yes, sir.
Opo.
Okay. Kapag naman reinforcement and punishment, think of it this way. Kapag reinforcement, isipin nyo na lang para siyang reward. Bakit ganon? Kasi, yung reinforcement, binibigay siya or ginagawa siya after a behavior para tumaas yung chance na maulit yung isang behavior. So, di ba kapag meron kayong magandang ginagawa, binibigyan kayo ng reward for that. So, ganun yung reinforcement. Sorry, excuse me. On the other hand naman, we have punishment. Kapag sinabi namang punishment, ginagawa to or binibigay ito after a behavior para bumaba yung chance na maulit yung isang behavior. So, di ba, let's say, nung bata kayo, or pwede rin naman until ngayon, kapag may ginawa kayong masama, pinapunish kayo ng parents nyo for that particular behavior. At ginagawa yun ng parents nyo para bumaba yung chance na maulit yung behavior na yun. Na-gets?
Yes,
Opo.
Okay. So, para mas madaling maintindihan, isa-isahin na natin yung different elements of operant conditioning. Unang-una, we have the pscyh. Okay, so pag sinabi namang pscyh, So, pagsamahin natin yung ibig sabihin, ano ba ibig sabihin ng positive, negative, or reinforcement and punishment. So, first, doon muna tayo sa positive punishment. Di ba kapag sinabing positive, meron kang dinadagdag. Kapag sinabing punishment, ginagawa to para bumaba yung chance na maulit yung isang behavior. So, since ayaw mong maulit yung behavior, ang ibibigay mo, ano bang ibibigay mo? Magandang bagay or pangit na bagay?
Pangit na bagay po.
Okay, pangit na bagay. So, ang nangyayari sa positive punishment is nagbibigay ka ng pangit na bagay para bumaba yung chance na maulit yung isang behavior. Kapag sinabi naman positive reinforcement, positive, again, may dinadagdag. Tapos reinforcement, ginagawa siya para tumaas yung chance na maulit yung isang behavior. So, in that sense, positive, nagdadagdag, reinforcement para maulit yung behavior. So, ang ibibigay mo is something na maganda. Something na gusto ng tao na yon. Kasi kung magbibigay ka ng bagay na ayaw niya, wala siyang pakialam dun sa bagay na yon. So, possible na hindi niya ulitin kung ano man yung behavior na ginawa niya before that particular consequence or before the reinforcement. So, positive reinforcement siya. Nagagets?
Yes po.
Opo.
Yes po.
Okay. Pagdating naman sa negative reinforcement, negative, nagtatanggal ka. And then, reinforcement, gusto mong maulit yung behavior. So, dahil na gusto mong maulit yung isang behavior, nagtatanggal ka ng isang bagay na ayaw ng tao na yun. And then, we have negative punishment. Negative, nagtatanggal ka. Punishment, ginagawa siya para hindi maulit yung isang behavior. So, dahil ayaw mong maulit yung isang behavior, magtatanggal ka ng isang bagay na gusto ng tao na yon. So, para mas madaling maintindihan, mag-cases tayo. Do not worry, I will be guiding you naman when it comes to the cases. So, Cherry. Cherry?
Hello po, sir.
Hello? Okay. So, Cherry, pabasa yung case number 5.
Primo, Primo always participate in class because when he does, his teacher gives him a lot of star marks, and every time he gets a star mark, his daddy buys him his favorite candy bar.
Okay. So, ganito ha.
So,
When identifying... Ay, sige, wait muna. When identifying the component of operant conditioning used in a particular case, ang gagawin niyo muna first is identify ano ba yung behavior na gustong maulit or ayaw na maulit. So once you've identified the behavior, ang gagawin niyo naman next step is to identify gusto bang maulit yung behavior na yon or ayaw maulit yung behavior na yon. So kapag nalaman niyo na yon, the next step is to identify kung meron bang dinagdag or may tinanggal para maulit or para hindi maulit yung behavior na yon. Kung may dinagdag, of course, that's positive. Kung may binawas, of course, that's negative. So sa case number 5, ano ba yung behavior na gustong maulit or ayaw na maulit?
yung makakakuha po si Primo ng star marks.
Okay.
So,
So, sige. Sige, ikaw na mag-explain.
so yun po yung makakakuha po si Primo ng star marks is ano po, parang gusto pong maulit kasi nga po positive po yung act na yun.
Okay?
Ang ano po is positive reinforcement po.
Kasi,
Positive reinforcement kasi po sa case po is makakatanggap siya ng reward every time po na makakakuha siya ng star marks.
which is,
Parang way po yun ng daddy ni Primo para maulit po ulit yung act na makakakuha po si Primo ng star marks.
okay. So, ano yung reward na binibigay ng daddy ni Primo?
Candy bar po.
Okay. So, yung favorite niyang candy bar. Okay. So, very good, Cherry. Palakpakan naman natin si Cherry. So, yun, well explained naman ni Cherry. Okay, so sa case number 5, siya kasi binibigyan or dinadagdagan ng daddy ni Primo, si Primo, ng favorite niyang candy bar para makakuha pa siya ng star mark. And since ang ginagawa ni Primo para makakuha ng star mark is active participation sa class, kaya mas ginagalingan niya sa klase. So, for our next case naman, tawag tayo ng next nating mag-recite. Angelica? 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 Wait po, yung mic ko po nasisira. Sige,
Sir?
wait muna. Ayan, okay na?
Opo.
Yun. Okay. So, Angelica, pabasa ng case number 6.
Case number 6. Chris went home 2 hours past her curfew. Consequently, her mother took her beloved phone from her for a week in order for her to learn a lesson.
Okay. So, ano yung behavior na gusto maulit or ayaw maulit?
Ano po? Para... Okay, 2 hours past. Para po di na po maulit yung paglagpas niya sa curfew.
Okay. So, yung paglagpas sa curfew, yung paglagpas sa curfew, ano ulit? Gusto maulit or ayaw maulit?
Ayaw po.
So, in that case, ano kaya yun? Is it reinforcement or punishment?
Punishment po.
Okay. Ngayon, anong ginawa para hindi na ulitin ni Chris yung behavior na yon? May dinagdag ba or may binawas?
May binawas po.
Which is,
Yung pagkuha po ng mama niya ng phone niya.
okay. So, in that case, since may binawas, ano kaya yun? Is it positive or negative?
Positive punishment po.
Bakit positive?
Para po ayun po, ma-learn yung lesson niya na hindi na siya lumagpas sa curfew niya.
Kapag positive, ano ba yun? May dinadagdag or may binabawas?
May dinadagdag. Ano po ba?
Okay. So may dinadagdag. Di ba tatandaan, kapag positive, plus sign. Kapag plus sign addition, so may dinadagdag. Negative, minus. Minus, may binabawas. So in this case, ano ba? May dinagdag ba o may binawas?
Ay, may binawas po.
So since may binawas, ano siya? Positive, negative?
Negative po, sir. Sorry.
So, the final answer is?
Negative punishment.
Okay. So, very good. Palakpakan naman natin si Angelica. Okay. So, for case number 6, negative punishment siya kasi kinuha yung phone niya. So, may tinanggal kay Chris. Okay? Para hindi na siya lumagpas sa curfew. So, ayaw na maulit yung paglagpas sa curfew. Kaya, punishment. That's why it's negative punishment. So, next person tayo. Ay, sorry. Hazel.
Yes po.
Okay, Hazel, pabasa mo na yung case number 7.
When Matthew showed his outstanding grades to his parents, they were so happy that they decided to stop asking him to wash the dishes anymore. A task he has always dreaded and complained about doing.
Okay. So, ano kaya yung behavior na gustong maulit or ayaw na maulit?
Yung gusto po nilang maulit is yung outstanding grades ni Matthew.
Okay, so since gusto maulit, ano yun? Reinforcement or punishment?
Gustong maulit. Reinforcement po.
Okay. So, anong ginawa para ulitin ni Matthew yung pagkakaroon ng mataas na grades? May tinanggal ba or may binawas? Ay, sorry, may tinanggal ba or may binawas? May dinagdag ba or may binawas?
May binawas po sila which is yung ayaw na task ni Matthew na paghuhugas ng plato.
Okay. So, in that case, is it positive or negative?
Negative po.
So, because of that, the final answer is?
Negative reinforcement.
Okay. So, very good. Palakpakan naman natin. So yon, well explain naman, negative reinforcement siya kasi tinanggal yung ayaw niyang task which is yung paghugas ng plato para i-continue ni Matthew yung pagkakaroon ng mataas na grades. So for our last case for operant conditioning, Eloisa.
Hi, sir. Hello
Hello,
po.
Eloisa. Babasa na ng case number 8.
Mitch was invited to her friend's birthday party. When she got there, her friend forced her to drink alcohol, which she has never tried before. After hours of heavy drink, she started throwing up in the bathroom, where she eventually slept. The next day, she woke up with a bad case of hangover and vowed to never drink again.
Okay. So for this particular case, medyo complex siya kasi usually kung napansin nyo dun sa mga previous cases natin, merong ibang taong involved pagdating sa operant conditioning. So kumbaga, may taong kinondisyon, tapos may taong nagko-condition. And for this particular case, si Mitch lahat yun. Okay? So ngayon, dito sa case na to, anong specific behavior kaya yung gustong maulit or ayaw ng maulit?
Yung ayaw niya pong maulit yung iinom po siya ng ng alcohol kasi po may consequences po after which is yung nga po, yung hangover.
Okay. So ngayon, ayaw niyang maulit yung behavior na yon. So in that case, ano kaya yun? Is it reinforcement or punishment?
Punishment po.
Okay, punishment. Ngayon, para makonclude ni Mitch na ayaw niya nang uminom ulit, ano ba nangyari? May dinagdag ba or may binawas?
May binawas po.
Ano yung binawas?
Yung pag-inom niya po.
Yun yung mismong behavior na ayaw
Ay.
niya nang ulitin.
Ah.
So, para, kumbaga, ano yung naging reason kung bakit ayaw niya nang uminom ulit?
Yung hangover po.
Okay. So, yung hangover ba, dinagdag ba yon kay Mitch or binawas yun kay Mitch?
Dinagdag po.
Okay, dinagdag. Kasi usually, wala namang hangover si Mitch. Okay? So, nalagdag
Opo,
lang
opo.
yung hangover. So, in that case, since dinagdag lang naman yung hangover, ano kaya yun? Is it positive or negative?
Positive po.
So, ang final answer natin is,
Positive punishment.
okay, good. So, very good, Eloisa. Palakpakan naman natin.
Thank you po.
So, the answer for case number 8 is positive punishment kasi may dinagdag which is yung hangover and dahil doon, ayaw nang maulit yung behavior which is yung pag-inom. Pero sabi niya lang yon, baka uminom ulit siya. May kilala ba kayong ganon?
Dami po.
Dami po.
Ahem.
Baka mag-name drop kayo Okay. Ang tawag dito, class, okay lang ba mag-extend tayo?
Okay po. Opo.
Yes po.
Yes
kahit
po.
until kahit until 10. Kaya pa ba?
Goods lang, sir.
Sige po, kaya
Kaya
naman.
po.
Lumalaban pa po.
Okay, okay. So,
Pero nawawala po.
nawawala? Hello?
Medyo
Malinaw
po,
na ba?
Apo, apo.
Okay, okay.
Apo, apo.
So, last meeting and yung kinontinue natin ngayon about behaviorism, nag-focus siya doon sa history of psychology. So, pinag-usapan natin yung mga prominent na schools of thought. And as I mentioned last time, kapag sinabing schools of thought, ito yung mga prominent movement or prominent ideas back then, prominent perspectives. Now, the schools of thought, kahit na hindi na sila ginagamit ngayon, some majority of them kumaga laid the foundation for the modern perspectives that we have today. So, kahit na hindi na applicable yung mga certain schools of thought like for example, structuralism, nakatulong sila para ma-form yung mga modern perspectives in psychology na meron tayo ngayon. And yun yung i-discuss natin for today. So, first let's discuss the psychodynamic perspective. The psychodynamic perspective was anchored on psychoanalysis. And of course, psychoanalysis was proposed by Sigmund Freud. Okay? So, the psychodynamic perspective is composed of different psychodynamic theories, and they also believe in the importance of early childhood experiences. Naniniwala sila that the early childhood experiences are very important when it comes to the formation of one's personality, as well as, of course, the existence of unconscious desires or unconscious drives. However, the psychodynamic perspective kasi has a lot of disagreement between its theorists. Um, Madidiscuss to pagdating yung sa theories of personality. Kasi, when it comes to the psychodynamic perspective, yes, a lot of their concepts are rooted in the ideas of Sigmund Freud. However, pagdating kasi sa ibang concepts ni Sigmund Freud, nagdi-disagree sila. So, ang tendency, maraming conflict pagdating sa psychodynamic perspective means, actually dati nag-aaway-away pa sila niyan. So, ang form kasi ng pag-aaway dati ng mga theorists or ng mga psychologists na meron tayo is kapag nagpa-publish sila ng paper nila. So for example, si Freud, nag-publish siya ng paper yung nasa tingin niya, ganito yung nangyayari. Tapos, yung isang psychodynamic theorist magdi-disagree sa kanya. So magpa-publish siya ng paper, tapos sasabihin niya na mali yung sinasabi ni Freud kasi ganito dapat. Tapos si Freud, syempre, sasagot siya doon, sasabihin niya na mali yung sinasabi ng ganito kasi ganito. So, nagba-back and forth sila ng away-away. So, yon again, may conflict tayo pagdating sa psychodynamic perspective. However, you have to understand na without psychoanalysis, possible na hindi na-form yung mga theories na yon. So, as much as merong disagreement pagdating sa different theorists and kay Freud din, we have to give credit where credit is due. So, dahil doon, Sigmund Freud pa rin is credited for the idea of psychodynamic perspective. So, kung papansin nyo dyan sa definition of the psychodynamic perspective, less emphasis on sexual motivations and more emphasis on the development of a sense of self, building relationships, and other things that motivate people. So, hindi na lang sila nag-focus dun sa unconscious drives and unconscious desires. Na while some of them believe that they exist, hindi lang yun yung nagmamotivate sa atin and hindi lang din yung childhood experiences natin yung nagmamotivate sa atin. Possible na meron pang ibang bagay na nagiging dahilan kung bakit tayo nag-act a certain way. So next naman, we have the behavioral perspective. So na-discuss naman na natin yung behaviorism. So kung ano lang yung behaviorism dati, na-translate yung, kumbaga, nag-persist siya through time and binago lang yung tawag sa kanya which is behavioral perspective. And of course, it was led by B.F. Skinner nga. So na-discuss naman na natin yung operant conditioning. So hindi na natin babalikan yon. Next naman, discuss natin yung humanistic perspective. Now, the humanistic perspective kasi emerged, kumbaga, as a response to behaviorism and psychodynamic perspective. The psychodynamic perspective kasi and behaviorism and the behavioral perspective are very deterministic. Kung naaalala niyo pa yung yung major philosophical issues in psychology, di ba meron tayong free will versus determinism? And the psychodynamic perspective kasi and the behavioral perspective kasi are very deterministic. Di ba kapag sinabing determinism, they believe that our actions are, kumbaga, we are not in control of our own decisions and our own actions. Na you do things not because you decide to do them or not because you want to do them, but because external factors and external forces urged you to do so. Na you might think na ginagawa mo yung isang bagay kasi gusto mong gawin, pero hindi totoo yun. It's possible na it's because of your environment or it's because of your personal experiences. Possible na it's because of your unconscious desires kung bakit mo ginagawa yung isang bagay. So kumbaga, yun yung outlook ng psychodynamic perspective. Na yung behavior mo ngayon, that's a result of your experiences back when you were a child. And possible na it's because of your unconscious drives kung bakit mo ginagawa yung mga bagay na yon. On the other hand naman, pagdating sa behavioral perspective, they believe that, di ba, certain behaviors can be learned. Okay? And kapag merong stimulus, merong response agad. So, ang nangyayari is that ginagawa mo yung isang certain behavior not because you want to do them. Ginagawa mo yung isang behavior kasi natutunan mong gawin yung bagay na yon. Let's say for example, nung high school kayo dati, merong bell sa school ninyo. So pag nag-ring yung bell, that is an indication na break na o di naman kaya uwian na. However, hindi hindi nyo naman na iniisip yun eh. Automatic response yun kasi na-condition nyo na kapag nag-ring yung bell, uuwi na ako. Kasi uwian na. So, hindi nyo iniisip na nag-ring yung bell, so dapat na akong umuwi. Automatic siya na nag-ring yung bell, so uuwi na ako. So, ganun yung perspective ng behavioral perspective, kaya siya deterministic. So, yung humanistic perspective kasi, they fall more on free will. Okay? They believe that we can direct our own lives and we are capable of making our own decisions. And for the humanistic perspective, they also believe that the goal or the ultimate goal is to reach one's fullest potential. Yun daw yung pinaka-goal natin sa buhay natin. Ma-achieve natin yung fullest potential natin. So, for the humanistic perspective, we will be discussing two individuals. So, the first of which is Carl Rogers. Now, Carl Rogers, meron siyang sariling theory of personality known as the person-centered theory. However, we will be focusing on the client-centered therapy. So, siya rin yung gumawa nun. Now, Carl Rogers believed na if you are a therapist and you want to facilitate or foster growth in your client, you have to have three characteristics or you have to have three conditions. So first of which is congruence. Kapag sinabing congruence, this refers to genuineness or realness. Kumaga, pagka-totoo. So, sabi kasi ni Carl Rogers, kung gusto mo na mag-grow yung client mo, gusto mo na ma-identify ng client mo kung ano ba yung mali niyang ginawa and mabago niya yung outlook niya sa buhay or mabago niya yung behavior niya, you have to be real to your client. Kasi magtitiwala lang sa'yo yung client mo kung sa tingin niya totoong tao ka. Kung sa tingin niya totoo yung sinasabi mo, nagpapakatotoo ka. Kasi some therapists feel kumaga parang plastic sort of na parang kahit anong sabihin mo, mag-a-agree lang sila na mag-a-agree and hindi nila sinasabi yung sarili nilang opinion. Ngayon, sa client-centered therapy, it's very important na maramdaman ng client mo na totoo ka sa kanila. So, kapag hiningi nila yung opinion mo, you have to give your honest opinion talaga in order for trust to be built. So, naintindihan ba?
Opo.
Yes po.
Yes po.
Medyo mabilis ba?
Opo.
Hindi naman po.
Okay, sige. So, next condition for growth is the unconditional positive regard. So, kapag sinabing unconditional positive regard kasi, it's more like accepting your client kahit ano pang yung ginawa nila. Okay? So, kumbaga, para siyang unconditional love in a sense. Natanggap kita kahit ano ka pa or mahal kita maging sino ka man. Parang ganun siya. So, why is unconditional positive regard important? Kapag kasi nararamdaman ng client mo na kahit anong sabihin nila sa'yo, hindi mo sila i-judge or tanggap mo pa rin sila, hindi sila magtatago ng mga bagay. Parang similar kasi to parent-child relationship. Kapag kasi, one of the reasons kung bakit merong mga anak na malihim sa mga magulang nila, it's possible na meron silang na-experience dati na nag-share sila ng isang bagay sa parents nila. Tapos kahit na nagiging honest lang naman sila, pinagalitan sila because of that. Okay? So dahil doon, parang na-feel nila na, ay kapag nagkukwento pala ako ng mga gantong bagay or kapag nakaka-experience pala ako ng mga gantong bagay, papagalitan lang ako. So kapag ganito yung experience ko, hindi ko na lang ikukwento, hindi ko na lang sasabihin para hindi ako mapagalitan. So similar to that fashion, unconditional positive regard is important. Yun nga, para maging open yung client mo sa'yo. Kasi kung nakikita ng client mo na ginajudge mo sila, possible possible na yung mga crucial na bagay or yung mga bagay na nahihirapan rin silang tanggapin sa sarili nila. Hindi nila masasabi sa'yo. And possible kasi na yun yung pinaka-root ng issue kung bakit hindi nila mabago yung sarili nila eh. And kapag hindi mo narating yung root ng issue, of course, hindi ma-resolve kung ano man yung problema. Ngayon, kailangan mong i-balance yung unconditional positive regard and congruence sa hindi porket sinabing unconditional positive regard. For example, nakapatay yung client mo. Sabi niya, kaya ako nandito kasi in order ako ng court na pumunta dito for therapy. tapos nakapatay ako, hindi mo sasabihin na okay lang makapatay, lahat tayo nakakapatay at some point in our lives. Hindi ganun yung unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard is, kumbaga, recognizing na mali yung ginawa, pero also recognizing na willing naman yung client mo na magbago. Kasi you have to be real as well. You have to be congruent. Na hindi mo sasabihin na okay lang makapatay, sasabihin mo na um, masama yung ginawa mo. And the fact na nandito ka ngayon, although sabihin na natin na you were ordered by the court to do this, pero you are participating, you are doing your best in our sessions, that is an indication na you are trying to change. And that is a good thing. Okay? So, kumbaga, yun yung balance ng congruence and unconditional positive regard. Na hindi mo kinukonsinte yung mga masama nilang ginagawa, pero, rin-recognize mo rin, or hindi mo sila, kumbaga, tina-turn away. Hindi mo sinasabi na, ay, ang sama-sama mo namang tao, dapat mamatay ka na, gano'n. Tanggap mo pa rin sila. Kahit gano'n yung ginawa nila. Pero you recognize na merong change na kailangang mangyari. So lastly, we have empathy. And empathy refers to putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Always remember that sympathy is different from empathy. Sympathy is more of compassion or pity. The difference between sympathy and empathy is, for example, nakita ka ng pulubi. Kapag nakita ka ng pulubi, sabi mo, ay, kawawa naman siya, wala siyang makain. That is sympathy. Pero, kapag nakita mo yung pulubi, tapos inisip mo, ay, ano kayo yung gagawin ko kapag ako yung nasa posisyon niya? That is empathy. Okay. So, according to Carl Rogers, empathy is important in a therapist kasi empathy, kumbaga, helps us connect to our client. Kapag kasi linalagay mo yung posisyon mo sa posisyon ng client mo, mas naiintindihan mo siya. And because of that, mas nakakapag-provide ka ng unconditional positive regard sa kanya. Minsan kasi, di ba, may tendency tayo to be very objective when we are giving advice, kahit to our friends lang. For example, ano ba? For example, sabihin natin na meron kang friend na madalas silang mag-break nung jowa niya. Tapos, lagi mo siya sinasabihin na, ay, iwanan mo na yan, ganyan-ganyan. Palagi ka lang sinasaktan. Well, that is the correct approach naman. Hindi ko naman sinasabi na kapag break lang kayo ng break ng jowa nyo, tapos toxic ng relationship, magstay kayo. That is not the case naman talaga. Na dapat hindi kayo magstay kung super toxic na sa inyong relationship. Kasi also, you also have to take care of yourself. Okay? However, may instances kasi na sobrang objective natin, and kapag dumadating naman sa point na tayo na yung nasa situation, ganun na rin naman yung ginagawa. So, dun kasi kumbaga naglalaki yung empathy mo na kapag ganun, yung approach ko, or kumbaga kapag yun yung nangyari sa akin, ano yung gagawin ko kaya? So, minsan kasi empathy helps us in giving advice din as well, or in guiding our clients, o di naman kaya kahit your friends lang to the right path. Na kapag kasi inisip mo kung ano yung nasa posisyon niya, maiintindihan mo yung point of view niya. And kapag naiintindihan mo yung point of view niya, possible na mas magbigay yun ng insight sa'yo kung ano ba talaga yung tamang approach para makipaghiwalay siya doon sa jowa niya. Kasi kung hiwalay lang agad-agad, possible na meron pang feelings doon and all that. So you have to consider that as well. So, again, empathy is important sa client-centered therapy kasi importante kay Carl Rogers na maintindihan mo yung client mo para maitama mo kung ano man yung behavior na gustong mabago. Nagets ba?
Yes
Yes,
po.
sir.
Yes po.
Sigurado?
Opo. Opo.
Okay. So, our next individual naman, for humanistic perspective is Abraham Maslow. So, alam ko naman na familiar kayo kay Abraham Maslow. I believe Abraham Maslow was already discussed in Understanding the Self. Tama ba?
Yes po.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes po.
So, just as a review, review lang natin yung hierarchy of needs. Kasi, of course, Abraham Maslow is known for his concept of hierarchy of needs. So, Abraham Maslow believed that our needs are hierarchical, pero ang different levels of needs tayo. Okay? And we always start from the bottom and we go to the top. And in order for us to go to the next level, kailangan mo nang masatisfy yung lower level needs. So isipin nyo na lang para siyang laro na may different levels. Di ba, kailangan mo muna matapos yung level 1 bago ka mag-proceed sa level 2. Kailangan mo muna matapos yung level 2 bago mag-proceed sa level 1. Okay, so ganun siya. Meron different steps na kailangan i-take bago makarating sa pinakataas. And always remember na pagdating sa needs na to, hindi ibig sabihin na kapag nasatisfy mo na yung isang level of need, hindi ka na babalik sa lower level needs. Kasi yung lowest level need natin, kailangan siyang masatisfy from time to time. Kailangan siya ma-replenish from time to time. Bakit ba? Isa-isahin natin yung level of needs. So first, we have physiological needs. And the physiological needs, ito yung mga kailangan natin for survival. So you have food, you have water, you have air, you have sleep. Sex is also considered as a physiological need, pero hindi in the sense na kapag hindi ka nakipag-sex, mamamatay ka. It's not because of that. Sex is considered a physiological need kasi physiological need is important for the survival of humankind. Of course, sex is important for reproduction. So, kung yung purpose ng sex is for reproduction, then that is considered as a physiological need. Kasi kapag nagkaroon ng reproduction, magkakaroon ng next generation. And kapag nagkaroon ng next generation, magpa-persist yung humankind. So, that is why sex is considered as a physiological need. Okay? So, wag niyong idahilan na sex is a physiological need, kaya gusto niyo laging gawin. Okay? It's not because of that. So, yon. Di ba sinabi ko kanina that the lowest level of need needs to be satisfied every once in a while. Kasi kung mapapansin nyo, yung physiological needs natin, nadideplete yan eh. So, for example, nagutom ka, kumain ka ngayon, mamaya-maya, magugutom ka ulit. So, sabihin natin na nasa love and belongingness needs ka na. Tapos nagutom ka. So, dahil nagutom ka, wala ka munang pakialam sa relationship mo. For example, di ba yung ibang magjowa, kapag nagugutom yung isa, magagalit. Tapos mag-aaway sila, aawayin nila yung jowa nila. So, dahil doon, or yung reason behind that is because mas important na masatisfy mo na yung physiological need bago yung love and belongingness needs. Nagigets ba?
Yes,
Opo.
sir.
Yes po.
Opo.
Yes po.
Okay. So, next naman, we have the safety and security needs. So, sa safety and security needs naman, meron dito papasok yung sense of security na nararamdaman mo that you are safe and you are secure. Kaya nga siya tinawag na safety and security needs. So, ang example nito are your home. Pwede rin naman pumasok dito yung financial security na meron ba akong panggastos sa araw-araw, na meron ba akong pambili ng mga bagay na kailangan ko. And then next naman, love and belongingness, ito yung need natin to be connected or need natin for intimacy from other people. So dito papasok yung family, need for friends, need for romantic relationships. And then next, we have the esteem needs. So sa esteem needs, dito papasok yung need natin for recognition and appreciation. So dito papasok na gusto mong magkaroon ng award, gusto mong pumasok sa top, gusto mong makabendang boss mo, dyan papasok yan. And then next, we have self-actualization. So, kapag na-reach mo daw yung self-actualization, na-reach mo na yung fullest potential mo as a person. So, for our next perspective, we have the cognitive perspective. And sa cognitive perspective, pinag-aaralan yung mga different cognitive functions or cognitive processes sa mga tao. So, pinag-aaralan how people think, remember, store, and use information. So, dito papasok, pinag-aaralan yung intelligence, learning, memory, perception, and all that. And paano pinag-aaralan yung mga cognitive functions? Pinag-aaralan yung cognitive functions through the use of cognitive neuroscience. So, cognitive neuroscience is a branch of neuroscience that focuses on how we study the different cognitive functions. And sa cognitive neuroscience, dito pumapasok yung mga tools na ginagamit natin in order to study the cognitive functions. For example, MRI, PET scan, CT scan, yung mga processes na yan or yung mga tools na yan, for example, lesioning, yung mga bagay na yan, na we will be discussing sa Unit 2, yun yung mga bagay na ginagawa or pinag-aaralan sa cognitive neuroscience. Naiintindihan ba?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Opo.
Okay. So, next naman is the socio-cultural perspective. So, the socio-cultural perspective kasi is actually a combination of social psychology and cultural psychology. Sa social psychology, pinag-aaralan dyan paano nakaka-apekto yung social factors or social environment na meron tayo sa mga behavior natin. So, Examples of social forces or social factors are our relationships, our interactions, social norms, and social roles. And then for cultural psychology, pinag-aaralan paano nakakaapekto yung culture ng isang tao sa behavior niya and what is considered as normal or abnormal behavior pagdating sa isang culture. Kasi remember, for certain cultures, meron tayong norms. Okay? Nasa ibang culture, this can be considered as normal, pero for other cultures, this is considered as abnormal. For example, in some cultures, circumcision is considered as normal, while in some, circumcision is not considered normal. For some cultures, considered normal yung child marriage, while in some cultures, hindi siya considered as normal. So, yun yung pinag-aaralan sa cultural psychology. Now, since combination lang naman ng both, yung socio-cultural perspective, dito pinag-aaralan paano nakaka-apekto yung social factors and cultural factors na meron tayo in our behavior. Next naman is the biopsychological perspective. So sa biopsychological perspective, biological basis of behavior and mental processes naman yung pinag-aaralan. So dito, pinag-aaralan natin kung paano nakaka-apekto yung biological forces or yung anatomy natin, yung physiology natin, genetics, yung mga bagay na yan, neurochemistry, structures of the brain, sa behavior natin. Na ano ba yung certain functions ng different areas of the brain? Ano yung nagiging epekto ng certain chemicals na meron tayo sa behavior natin and sa mental processes natin? Ano yung nangyayari sa nervous system natin kapag nag-iisip tayo? Yan yung mga bagay na pinag-aaralan sa biopsychological perspective. And yung isang phenomenon na nakaapekto or kumbaga, yung isang phenomenon na nag-open ng doors pagdating sa biopsychological perspective is the case of Phineas Gage. So yung case ni Phineas Gage, nandun naman yan sa module. So I will be giving you a summary na lang. So si Phineas Gage kasi, railroad foreman siya. And one day, on the job, nagkaroon ng accident. So meron siyang, I believe that's an iron rod or basta metal rod siya. So the iron rod na ginagamit niya, tumalsik because of an explosion. And tumalsik yung metal rod or yung iron rod, tapos na-pierce yung skull niya. So kung makikita nyo dun sa left image, yan yung illustration kung saan yung placement ng iron rod kay Phineas Gage. So kung papansin nyo, lumusot talaga sa skull niya yung iron rod. And then yung image sa right, yan yung picture ni Phineas Gage, hawak-hawak niya yung iron rod na nag-pierce sa skull niya. So, since nakita nyo naman na hawak-hawak ni Phineas Gage, yung iron rod, it meant na, or it means na na-survive ni Phineas Gage. So, fortunately, na-survive niya naman yung accident. However, meron kasing dramatic shift pagdating sa personality ni Phineas Gage right after the accident. Prior to the accident kasi, Phineas Gage was known as smart, shrewd. Actually, parang considered siya as an ideal employee. He was very smart, very punctual. He was, kumbaga, mahaba yung patience niya. And then afterwards, after the accident, napansin nila na parang very impatient na siya, very aggressive, very violent. So merong dramatic shift nga pagdating sa personality ni Phineas Gage. And of course, a lot of people speculated na kaya nangyari yun, it's because of the damage sa certain structures ng brain ni Phineas Gage. So, dahil doon, a lot of people, kumbaga, theorize that certain areas of the brain have specific functions. So, dahil doon, kumbaga, yun yung naging way para magkaroon ng a lot of studies regarding ano ba yung different functions ng different areas of the brain. Na etong structure of the brain, ano yung focus niya pagdating sa function ng, let's say, personality, or is it intelligence, or is it memory, aggression, emotions, hunger ba, temperature regulation, ano yung function ng area of the brain na to. So, kumbaga, yung case ni Phineas Gage yung nag-lead ng way para sa lot of studies regarding biopsychological perspective. Naintindihan ba?
Yes
Opo.
Yes,
po, sir.
sir.
Po. Yes po.
Okay. So, dun na tayo sa last perspective, which is the evolutionary perspective. So, yung evolutionary perspective, it seeks to explain general mental strategies and traits such as why we lie, how attractiveness influences mate selection, or why fear of snakes is common. Hindi yan snacks, snakes yan. Okay? So, Yung evolutionary perspective kasi is rooted in the idea of Charles Darwin. So, similar to William James, naalala pa ba si William James?
Yes po.
Yes po.
Okay. Ano yung school of thought na pinopose ni William James?
Functionalism.
Okay, good. Functionalism. So, pagdating kasi sa evolutionary perspective, dito pinag-aaralan kung bakit nagpo-persist yung certain behavior na hindi naman naturo sa atin. 'Di ba, sabi ni William James, kung naalala niyo pa, last meeting, naniniwala siya that certain behavior can be passed down either through learning or through heredity. Na meron daw tayong mga behavior na ginagawa na hindi naman tinuro sa atin, pero alam natin na ito yung dapat yung reaction natin for certain behavior. O kumbaga, when it comes or when we are exposed to certain stimuli. So similar to that fashion, pagdating sa evolutionary perspective, we are trying to explain certain behavior or certain phenomena uh, in relation to the ways of our ancestors. Kumbaga, pinapaniwalaan kasi na sa evolutionary perspective, kaya meron tayong certain behavior or certain phenomena na nangyayari when it comes to certain stimuli, it's because of the experiences of our ancestors. Na yung mga behavior kasi ng ancestors natin dati na nakatulong for their survival, napapasa yon sa mga future generations, napapasa yon sa offspring nila para makasurvive rin yung offspring nila. And ang nangyayari is napapasa yon hanggang ngayon. So for example, para mas madaling maintindihan nila, pag-usapan natin yung fear of snakes. So, kaya daw common yung fear of snakes. Actually, di lang naman fear of snakes, kundi pati yung fear of spiders. Kaya common yung fear of snakes and fear of spiders from an evolutionary perspective. It's because, di ba, a lot of snakes and a lot of spiders are venomous. And a lot of the times, yung venom nila are lethal. And sometimes, kapag yung ancestors natin, na-bite sila or na-sting sila, nung snake or nung spider, tapos lethal, yung venom, ang mangyari is possible na magkasakit sila or possible na mamatay sila. So dahil doon, our ancestors had to be very wary of snakes and spider. So ang nangyari is nag-translate ngayon yun into fear. Na kapag nakakita sila ng snake or spider, natatakot sila. So dahil doon, kumbaga na-recognize that the fear of snakes and spiders is important para makasurvive yung mga ancestors natin. So dahil doon, yung fear of snakes and fear of spiders, napapasa ngayon yun sa anak nila. And of course, nagamit rin yun ng anak nila in order for them to be safe from spiders and snakes. And napasa ulit yun ng napasa hanggang makarating sa atin. Kaya common pa rin yung fear of snakes and spiders hanggang ngayon. Nagagets ba?
Yes po.
Sigurado?
Pwede magtanong.
Sige, sige.
So, ibig
Yes.
sabihin po ba kapag ganun po, halimbawa, sa, sa family nyo, ganun po, for example,
Medyo mahina. Sorry,
possible.
medyo mahina.
Ayun, halimbawa po, kapag halimbawa sa family, ano doon, may isang member doon na, ayun, nagsisinungaling, ganun, for example, possible ba na pwede niyang mapasa yun for the future generation? Yung trait niya na ganun.
From an
Kung,
evolutionary sorry. From an evolutionary perspective, pwede. Pero ganito kasi ha, you have to understand that when it comes to the perspectives in psychology, the reason why we have different perspectives kasi there is a lot of disagreement kung ano ba talaga yung tama. And a lot of the times, kapag yung mga tao, nagsistick lang sila sa isang perspective na etong perspective lang yung pinaniniwalaan ko, etong perspective lang yung pinaniniwalaan ko, nalilimit yung explanation for certain behavior. A lot of the times kasi, there is a reason naman kung bakit nagsistay pa rin tong perspectives na to eh. Na kaya meron pa rin tayo ng mga perspectives na to kasi they make a lot of sense naman. And a lot of them are proven by studies naman. Okay? However, ayun nga, kapag isang perspective lang yung pinaniniwalaan mo, hindi kasi possible na ma-explain nun lahat ng klase ng behavior na meron. So, a lot of the times, yung mga certain behavior, the explanation behind them results from an interaction between different perspectives. Like for example, sabihin natin or ano ba? Hmm. For example, sabihin natin na yung isang tao is very ano ba? Sabihin natin na yung isang tao is very promiscuous siya. Okay? Kapag sabi promiscuous, very sexually active siya. So kung titignan natin, sabihin natin, for example, from a psychodynamic perspective, possible na meron siyang key experience dati nung bata siya that led to him or her to be very promiscuous. Okay? Tapos, let's say naman, from a biological perspective, ang possible na maging explanation nun is because meron siyang certain structure ng brain or certain area of the brain that is very, very, kumbaga, very, very active majority of the time. And because of that, yun yung nagiging dahilan kung um, bakit siya promiscuous. Now, kung titignan natin siya at a general point of view, possible kasi na combination siya of the psychodynamic perspective and the biological perspective. Na kaya siya, kumbaga na, kaya siya promiscuous kasi possible na meron siyang, ang tawag dito, meron siyang experience dati na nag-lead kung bakit siya promiscuous. And possible na it's because of the biological makeup as well. Ngayon, kung i-apply natin yun dun sa lie, pwede natin sabihin na kung nakatulong sa kanya yung paglalay, possible na maipasa niya. Pero we have to think muna kung bakit ba siya nagsisinungaling. Okay? Possible kasi na ma-explain ng ibang perspective kung bakit nagsisinungaling yung tao na yun. Tapos, kasi, um, when it comes to the explanation of certain behavior, um, meron kasi tayong tinatawag na predisposition eh. So, kapag sinabing kapag sinabing predisposition, this is our tendency. Or kumaga, this is our tendency to act a certain way. Para ganun. Or this is our vulnerability to act a certain way. Pero, just because you have a tendency or a vulnerability to act a certain way, doesn't mean na you will do that. Possible na merong isang bagay or merong isang experience na mag-trigger ng vulnerability mo for that. For example, this will be discussed naman sa abnormal psychology pero sige, since this was brought up or possible kasi siya na maging explanation for that eh. For example, um, you have you have a relative na merong mood disorder. Sabihin natin na you have an uncle na merong bipolar disorder, bipolar 1 disorder. Now, since meron kang uncle na merong bipolar 1 disorder, of course, uh, that gives you a predisposition to have a certain mood disorder as well. So sabihin natin na may chance kang magkaroon ng depression, major depressive disorder. Now, possible or kumbaga, kapag sinabi kasi predisposition, mas mataas lang yung chance mo kaysa sa ibang tao na magkaroon ng depression. However, kung wala namang enough reason para magkaroon ka ng depression, possible na hindi ka magkaroon ng major depressive disorder. So, similar to that, possible na mapasa yung pagiging habitual liar. Pero kung wala namang dahilan para magsinungaling siya, hindi naman, kumbaga, parang hindi matitrigger yung predisposition niya to lie. So, tatandaan nyo, wag nyo lang ilimit yung sarili niyo sa isang perspective, ha? Kasi as much as possible nga in psychology, we try to explain things from a biopsychosocial perspective. Okay? Kapag sinabing biopsychosocial, nakaka-apekto yung biological. Sa biological kasi papasok yung biological perspective and evolutionary perspective. Tapos, psychological yon. Okay? And then sociocultural yon. So, yung humanistic, yung psychodynamic, dun yung papasok sa psychological. And then, yung behavioral, tapos yung sociocultural, dun yung papasok sa social. So, biopsychosocial perspective. Okay ba?
Opo, sir. Thank you po.
Yes po.
Feeling ko sobrang dami kong sinabi. Mahirap kasing i-explain
Okay na po.
ng, ang tawag dito, mahirap siyang i-explain without discussing the other concepts pa kasi. Okay? So, sige ganito. Ano ba? Our next lesson kasi is about research in psychology. Okay? However, yon anong oras na kasi? So, ganito ang gagawin natin. Yung research in psychology, as I mentioned naman, I will be providing you lecture video, promise talaga, before next meeting. Tapos, both naman yun for Unit 1 and Unit 2. So, pakinood na lang yung part ng sa research in psychology. Kung gets nyo naman na yung mga previous din na discuss natin, no need for you to watch them. Pero yung research in psychology, watch it, make sure to watch it, and make sure to read the module. Para pagdating natin ng next meeting, yon, I will be asking for your participation. I will be facilitating yung focus group discussion natin. Tapos, if may clarifications kayo, if merong bagay na hindi malinaw sa inyo, yun, i-explain ko siya in detail. Okay? So, before I discuss na lang the assessment for Unit 1, ano lang, for icebreaker lang, para naman maging kayong insight ninyo, and at the same time, may mapag-usapan tayo na related sa topic without kumbaga, without focusing on the lesson lang, or without focusing on the actual concepts discussed. Let me ask you a question. Okay? So, etong question na to, let's say may jowa kayo. Okay, sabihin natin may boyfriend or girlfriend kayo. Okay, you have a partner. Oh. Pero imagination lang ha. Tapos, sabihin natin na your partner confessed na nag-cheat sila sa inyo. So, sabihin natin nag-cheat sila sa inyo. Now, while cheating is not okay, I just want to know, uh, kung papipiliin kayo, ano yung mas prefer ninyo na ginawa ng partner ninyo? Is it sexual cheating or emotional cheating? Kapag sinabing sexual cheating, sasabihin ng partner ninyo na nakipag-engage siya sa sexual intercourse, however, wala daw feelings na involved. On the other hand, kapag sinabi namang emotional cheating, ito yung wala man silang ginagawa na sexual act, pero sabi niya na mahal niya na yung tao na yun. Or nafe-feel niya yung intimacy sa tao na yun. Okay? So, this is related naman to the evolutionary perspective kasi there is an evolutionary explanation for this. Pero I just want to get your insight before we proceed to the explanation. So, I will call a few people. Just give me your insight. Hindi naman ibig sabihin na sumagot kayo na gusto niyo mangyari sa inyo na mag-cheat yung partner ninyo. No, it's not the case. Kumaga, pinapapili lang kayo just for the sake na pinapapili kayo. Okay? So, Joy Ann.
Opo.
Okay, so kung papipiliin ka, which do you prefer?
Yung wala pong feelings.
So, is it sexual cheating or emotional cheating?
Yung sexual cheating po.
Sorry?
Yung sexual cheating po.
Sexual cheating. Bakit sexual cheating?
Kasi kapag yung may feelings na po siya dun sa sa ibang tao po, parang questionin ko na rin po yung sarili ko na baka ako po yung may kasalanan, ganun po.
Okay, fair point. Next. How do you pronounce this? Chesney?
Milk Tea and Pearls, Catherine and Danielle.
Shaznay po.
Okay, Chesney. So, Chesney, kung ikaw naman yung papipiliin, which do you prefer?
Ano po, yung gusto ko na lang, ayoko po nung, bali yung sexual cheating na lang po kaysa emotional.
So, mas ayaw mo ng emotional?
Opo.
Okay. Bakit sexual cheating na lang?
Kasi po at least po doon, parang isa lang pong pagkakamali na, I mean, hindi, unlike po dun sa emotional cheating na talagang yung love niya, yung binigay niya dun sa kung sino man po yun. Yun po yung mas masakit for me.
Okay. Next. Ira. Ira. Ira, andito ba si Ira?
Wala po ata, sir.
Okay, okay. Sige. Ano na lang? Next tayo. Francis.
Sir,
Francis.
sir.
Ayun. Kung papipiliin ka, ano yung mas prefer mo na lang?
Sa akin din po, sir. Ano din po, yung sa sexual na lang din po.
Emotional, tol.
Bakit?
Mathematic na yan.
Kasi po, mas masakit po para
Ay,
sa akin
hindi.
kapag
Hindi, yung
wala
sa
na yung
sexual.
pagmamahal sa ng isang tao. Kaysa sa
Mathematic na yan.
nakipag-sex lang. Kasi hindi naman natin alam kung bakit
Malay
siya
mo,
nakipag-sex. Posibleng ako rin yung may mali. Ganun po, sir.
Malay mo, di mo masatisfy.
Okay.
Diba?
So, eto ha. Um, anong tawag dito? When someone
Sige daw.
cheats in a relationship, huwag niyong sisihin yung sarili ninyo. Okay? I do not mean this,
Wala.
I did not mean for this discussion uh, to be parang love advice kasi hindi naman yun yung topic natin. Pero yun lang, do not blame yourself kapag nag-cheat yung partner ninyo. Kasi at the end of the day, cheating naman is a choice. Okay? So, pinag-isipan yan. Although, some would say na it was a rash decision, but still, they decided to do that. Okay? Well, anyway, bakit ko ba tinanong to sa inyo? Bakit ko ba hiningi insight ninyo regarding this? Kasi there was actually a study regarding this particular phenomenon na nagtanong sila na if ever na nag-cheat sa yung partner mo, which would you prefer for kumaga, which would you prefer? Sexual cheating ba or emotional cheating? And um dun sa results ng study, nakita nila na there is a difference
Ay,
between the
emotional ako,
answers
tol.
of the males and the females. Okay? So merong difference between sexes or merong difference among the sexes. However, hindi ibig sabihin na 100% ito yung sagot ng males, 100% ito yung sagot ng females ha. Majority lang ito yung sagot ng males, majority lang ito yung
Hindi kasi
sagot ng
pag
females.
emotional
Okay.
yung
Now,
cheat
sa tingin
niya,
nyo,
ibig sabihin
anong sex yung mas prefer na sexual
bakit hindi
cheating
talaga
kaysa emotional cheating?
kayo tama sa isa't isa?
Babae.
Diba?
Babae.
Lalaki po.
Okay,
Diba?
so some of you
Parang
answered
mali
babae,
ang
some of you
relasyon nyo.
answered lalaki. So
Wala.
actually, lumabas sa
Isipin mo
results
kasi kung
na
mag-cheat,
yung mga babae,
kung
mas
mag-cheat
prefer
ka,
nila na yung partner nila
ay
nag-engage
kung
sa sexual
parang
cheating rather
mag-engage
than
lang sa
emotional
sexual cheating,
cheating.
parang
And
yun,
yung mga lalaki, mas prefer nila na yung mga partner nila nag-engage sa sa emotional cheating
diba?
rather than sexual cheating. Why is that?
Oh,
According to the evolutionary perspective, ang reason daw for that, of course, is due to our ancestors. And due to the traditional roles
at least
of
alam mo,
our ancestors
hindi
back
ka na
then.
mahal.
So, doon muna tayo sa mga lalaki. Bakit mas prefer ng lalaki na emotional cheating yung partner nila or emotional cheater yung partner nila rather than a sexual cheater? Back then kasi, 'di ba, our ancestors, yung mga lalaki nating ancestors, they were the hunters gatherers. Okay? So kumbaga, they risk their lives on a daily basis just to provide food for their family. And very important kasi in the idea of evolution na maipasa mo yung traits mo eh. Kasi kapag naipapasa mo yung traits mo, there is survival. Kasi yung traits mo, yung genes mo, nagsisurvive, nagpa-persist siya over time. Kasi, kumbaga, yung traits mo and yung genes mo napapasa mo sa next generation. Ngayon, kung ikaw yung lalaki, tapos binubuwis mo yung buhay mo on a daily basis para mag-provide sa isang bata na hindi mo naman anak, well then, may something off doon. Kasi hindi mo na ipapasa yung traits mo. So, paano kapag namatay ka, tapos wala kang sariling anak? Then, hindi mo napasa yung traits mo, hindi mo napasa yung genes mo for the next generation. So, walang survival. So, mas prefer ng lalaki na yung asawa nila magmahal ng ibang lalaki pero walang sex na mangyayari Kesa may sex na mangyari tapos hindi pala nila anak yung pinagpo-providean nila ng food. On the other hand naman, 'di ba, in our ancestors, the traditional roles of women is nurturer. Sila yung taga-alaga ng mga bata. So, ang tendency for that is, wala silang problema sa sexual cheating kasi at the end of the day, naipapasa nila yung genes nila eh. Naipapasa nila yung traits nila. Kasi, alam naman nilang anak nila yon. Sa kanila nang galing yon. Sila yung naglabas ng anak nila. However, the problem lies in that, since yung mga lalaki, yung hunters gatherers, yung mga lalaki yung nagpo-provide ng pagkain. Ngayon, sa perspective ng babae, okay lang na yung asawa ko is mag-cheat sexually sa mga iba't ibang babae as long as at the end of the day, ako pa rin yung mahal niya. Kasi kung ako yung mahal niya, kahit ilang babae pa siya makipag-sex, ako pa rin yung babalikan niya. And kapag ako yung mahal niya, ako yung binabalikan
Parang
niya,
may age na
makakapag-provide siya
pagbalik
sa
mo.
akin and sa family ko. Nagagets ba?
Yes.
Yes po.
So,
Opo.
yun yung evolutionary perspective, kumbaga, or yun yung evolutionary explanation behind that certain phenomenon. So, yun lang, just wanted to share that tidbit. Now, let's proceed na tayo dun sa assessment. So, for your assessment, kung nabasa nyo na, yung assessment sa last part ha, di ba, sabi ko last time, you may answer the diagnostic assessment and the exercises in the module for Unit 1. However, kapag sinagutan nyo yun, hindi naman siya graded. So, you may answer it on your own. Wala namang kailangang ipasa sa akin. Kumbaga, practice questions lang siya para sa inyo. Just to check kung naiintindihan nyo ba talaga yung lesson. Okay. Now,
Kaso ang dami
ano ba yung assessment? Yung assessment, ito ngayon yung
dami rin
graded
kasi
part.
laman nung ano.
Okay, so ito yung last part na nakita nyo sa module just before the references.
Ang
So, we
daming
have two
terms.
assessments. First is
Mahirap
case
ito.
analysis. So, for the case analysis,
Meron ipapasa
may
ito.
case doon, tapos may guide question. So, you just need to answer the guide
Case
question.
analysis.
I already posted the template and the rubric for the case analysis. So, giyahin nyo na lang yung format, nandun yung template, giyahin nyo na lang yung format, or i-apply nyo na lang yung format na nasa template when answering the case analysis. Tapos, for the rubric, yun yung basis ko for grading the case analysis. So, make sure na gagawin yung case analysis in accordance to the criteria indicated on the rubric. Tapos, ganito ha, for the case analysis, it will be done by pairs. So, hindi siya individual. By pairing siya gagawin. So, ilan ba kayo sa class?
43.
Anyone? Ilan kayo sa class? 40? 42? 42? 43. Okay. So, since 43, merong isa na magtatatlo. Pero isa lang dapat yung tatlo ha. Isa lang dapat yung trio doon. The rest, tigdadalawa lang. So, kayo na bahala mag-partner sa mga sarili ninyo. And then, send nyo na lang sa president ninyo kung sino yung ka-partner ninyo. And then, president, pakigawa na lang ng list sa Word. And then, pakisend sa akin para aware ako kung sino yung magkaka-partner. So, meron kayong 1 week to accomplish the case analysis. Okay? Ipapasa siya ng file format sa Canvas, naka-PDF dapat. So, isa lang yung matatanggap ko, ha? Since pair naman kayo, isa lang dun sa magka-partner yung magsasend sa akin para hindi na maulit. Kasi mamaya, chichikan ko, tas same lang naman pala kasi kayo naman pala yung magka-partner. Nagagets ba?
Yes.
Okay. Now, next naman, aside from our case analysis, we have our research report. Question, may stats na ba kayo? This cycle? Psych stats? Or wala pa?
Meron po.
Meron na po.
Meron na. Sino prof nyo? Si Sir Gerald ba?
Opo.
Opo.
Nag-survey na ba kayo?
Di pa po.
Hindi pa kayo pinagkakonduct ng data collection or survey?
Ay, pinag-conduct po.
Pinagkonduct na kayo? So, nakapag-data collection na kayo?
Opo po.
Okay, okay. Ilang groups yun, no?
Yes po.
Ilang group? Ilang members per group?
9.
9 members per group. Okay.
9 or 8.
So,
Hindi ah.
9 or 8. Okay. So, ganito ha. Ang gagawin natin sa research report, para hindi na ulit kayo mag-data collection, kung ano yung data na nakolektin nyo sa stats, yun rin yung gagawin ninyo. Ang gagawin lang naman kasi sa research report, yung research report kasi, assessment siya for the research in psychology part of the lesson or of the unit. Ang gagawin lang naman sa research report, gagawa lang kayo ng, again, written report or write-up
Okay, madali
for
lang.
the results or kumbaga, tama, for the results of your study.
Ah,
So,
shit.
bale, ang mangyayari,
Shit. Wala
pinost
kaming
ko na rin
final.
naman yung template for the research report and the rubrics. So, yung template, pakasunod na lang, nakalagay din dun sa template kung ano yung kailangan ninyong ilagay for each part of the research report. For example, for the introduction, linagay ko doon kung ano yung dapat nakalagay sa introduction. For the methods, nakalagay din doon. May instructions doon. If meron na lang kayong questions, further questions regarding the format, message na lang kayo sa group chat para if ever na yun din yung sagot or yun din yung tanong, sorry, ng mga kaklase ninyo, at least magbabackread na lang sila para malaman nila yung sagot for that. And yun, pakibasa rin yung rubrics kasi yun din yung magiging basis ko for grading the research report. So, for the research report, kung ano yung groupings ninyo sa survey or sa data collection na kinonduct ninyo sa stats, yun din yung magiging groupings nyo for the research report. However, I do not want to hear any complaints about groupmates na hindi tumutulong, so make sure na you are participating. Okay? Aside from that, ano pa ba? Ayun, the deadline for the research report will be 2 weeks from now. So again, yung deadline for the case analysis will be next week.
Gara
So
mo,
that
Carlo.
is October 29.
Gara mo,
So,
jinx
October
mo.
29 yung deadline for the case analysis. Tapos for the research report, ang deadline niya naman is November 5. So, sa case report, isa lang din yung magpapasa sa Canvas sa grupo.
Wala tayong gagawin eh.
Okay? So, ilang groups kayo sa stats?
5. Ilan ba
5
tayo?
po, sir.
6.
5. So, dapat sa research report, limang research reports lang yung marireceive ko. Tapos, pagdating naman sa case analysis, since 43 kayo, 21 lang dapat yung case analysis na matatanggap ko. Nagets ba?
Yes po.
Yes
Okay.
po.
May questions ba?
Wala naman.
Wala na po.
Okay. So, may natutunan ba?
Yes po.
Marami po.
Okay, sige. Buti naman.
Meron.
So, yun lang muna tayo for today. So, I will be seeing you next week. So, goodbye, class.
Adios.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir.
Thank you po.
Thank you po.
Bye.
Nice day.
Take
Adios,
care.
kids.
Bye, sir.
Adios.
Cute naman. Bye-bye.
Kids naman.